The word there uses the CDE pose. Let's go ahead and apply that. Next, we have U, which is the QUW pose. And for C, it's a mix of two shapes. It starts with CDE and then transition into AHJ.
Say about my brother, stay away from my brother, cause I say so. If you put your paws on my brother, you'll meet the jaws of his brother. Those are the laws for my brother.
Okay, welcome to this video. Today we're going to look at animating lip sync and facial expressions using LipMeter. So here we have the RigGNS panel, which was used to import the Genesis figure from DAZ Studio, and it was also used to rig this figure. So now we're going to bring this character to life by creating a lip sync animation. So here on the LipMeter panel, we have the create controller button right there. But before we look into this, first let's expand the RigGNS tab, where you will find these two fields which are important for setting up the lip sync animation. The first field here displays the character's rig, which is currently our active object, while the second field lists all the meshes parented to the rig. You can see we have the Genesis figure, the hair, jacket, necklace, pants, shirts, and shoes. So it is important we have the correct mesh selected here on this field. You can see we have the Genesis figure selected, which is this mesh that we're going to be creating the lip sync on. You can see it says Genesis 8 male figure. LipMeter automatically detects the correct mesh, but if it happens that it picks the wrong one, you can simply select the correct mesh from this field to ensure everything works properly. Okay, so before we go ahead and click the create controller button, there's one more thing we need to do, and that is we need to make sure that any separated mesh that is part of the face needs to be joined with the face mesh. Okay, so when this figure was imported, the mustache beard part here was originally separated from the main figure. Let me quickly separate that again so I can show you how to join that back. So I'll switch to edit mode, press L and then P, select separate by selection, then go back to object mode. I'll select the mustache and now you can see it's a separate object. Okay, so for the lip sync to work properly, all the facial meshes needs to be joined to the main mesh, and that might sometimes include the eyelashes and the brows. So now to match the separated mesh back into the main mesh, first select the mesh or meshes and then select the main mesh last. Now just press Ctrl J to join them together. And now we have the mustache joined to the main mesh again. So with that done, let's go ahead and look at the create controller button. Now, right next to the create controller button, there's a toggle button with the speaker icon. If you enable it, LipMeter will automatically generate mouth shapes for lip sync. But if you leave it disabled, clicking create controllers will only generate the controllers without any mouth shapes. Alright, so with the mouth shape button disabled, I'll go ahead and click create controllers. So now we have the essential controllers appear in the viewport, and we have 8 of them. So now when I select one of the controllers, you'll see here in the panel it says scale controller for effect, and what that means is with the AHJ controller selected, when I press S and move the mouse back and forth, you'll notice the meter moving from min to max, which applies the controller. But there's an easier way to apply the controller without having to press S every time, and that is by clicking within this white circle, which is actually the scale widget here. So clicking the circle and moving the mouse applies the controller, but of course you can see nothing is changing in the character's deformation, and that is because we disabled the option to generate mouth shapes. Okay, so let's go ahead and undo the controller creation by pressing Ctrl Z until the controllers are completely removed from the viewport. Now with the create mouth shapes option enabled, I'll select the rig and click the create controllers button again. Alright, now we have the controllers created along with their mouth shapes. So now when I select AHJ, click within this white scale circle and drag, you can see the character's mouth moving accordingly. Of course the mouth shape is not perfect, but we'll clarify that later. Let's also check BMP. You can see what that looks like. Let's also take a look at CDE. Okay, so now you can see the add-on has automatically generated the necessary mouth shape for animating our lip sync. Now at the bottom of the viewport is the pose library asset shelf. This feature is only available if the pose library add-on is enabled, and to enable that, let's go to edit, then preferences, add-ons, and search for pose. Here you can see the add-on is enabled. If it's not enabled on your end, you'll need to activate it to access the asset shelf. And if after enabling the add-on you still don't see the pose library shelf, you can bring it up by clicking this small upward arrow at the bottom of the viewport. In previous Blender versions, the asset shelf was part of the animation tab, which is located around here. But in this version of Blender, which is version 4.32, the animation tab has been removed. Now the asset shelf appears directly at the bottom of the screen. Alright, so what the asset shelf does is it allows us to manage and apply different poses assigned to the controller. Here we can adjust the thumbnail size by increasing the value. And when we enable the names option here, the pose names will be visible as well. Now to apply the poses from the asset shelf, make sure all the controllers are either deselected by clicking an empty space in the viewport, or they are all selected. Only then will clicking a pose apply it. But I prefer having them deselected because it's easier to just click on an empty space in the viewport than select all the controllers every time. However, if only one of the controllers is selected, clicking the poses will not apply them unless it is that selected controller. So if you're going to use the asset shelf to create your lip sync, remember to always have the controllers deselected before applying the poses. Okay, another advantage of using the asset shelf is that it allows us to gradually blend the poses. For instance, when I click and drag on a pose, you can see the transition between the controllers. And here, the first pose in the asset shelf is the 0 pose, which resets all the controllers to their default states. Now back to the lip meter panel, we have this new button for creating new controllers. Attached to it is the pose library option. When this option is enabled, the created controller will automatically have a pose added to the asset shelf, and when it's disabled, the controller will be created without any associated pose in the asset shelf. So before creating a new controller, let's scale down the size of these poses. Now when I enable the pose library option and then create a new controller, now we should see a new entry appear in the asset shelf with the same name. I can click new again to create another controller, and you'll see it's labeled as new 002, and we have the same name reflected in the asset shelf. However, when I disable the pose library option, let's scale this down to create some room there. Now when I create a new controller, we should see that no corresponding pose was generated in the asset shelf for that controller. Alright, next we have the remove button. Clicking it simply deletes the selected controller from the viewport. I'll go ahead and also remove this one and this one as well. Okay, so on the side of the panel here we have a few useful buttons. First, there's the reset button, which restores all controllers. You can see after applying some of the controllers, clicking the reset button restores all back to their default state. Alright, next we have the hide controllers button, which hides the controller from the viewport while keeping them active. This is useful when animating as it prevents them from getting in the way. And below that is the subdivision toggle button, which turns on and off the subdivision modifier on the mesh. This is to improve the playback speed when previewing the lip sync animation by disabling the subdivision modifier. And this button can be helpful when working with high poly characters. Now let's look at the modify shapes section. This section allows us to adjust the figure's shape or deformation influenced by the controllers. Let's demonstrate this by creating a new controller. So I'll go ahead and click the new button. That's our new controller. Now when I click the modify shape option, we are provided with options to modify the shape in either edit mode, sculpt mode, or pose mode. Now let's choose to modify in pose mode. So I'll try creating a simple smile by adjusting the mouse bone. So with the x-axis mirror enabled, I'll press G and move this bone sideways. Once that looks okay, we can then click the apply button. But before applying the modification, notice we have a message here that says modify only in pose mode. This means that when modifying in pose mode, you should remain in pose mode without switching to edit mode or sculpt mode. Okay, so I'll go ahead and click the apply button. Now if further adjustments are needed, we can choose to modify in edit mode or sculpt mode. Let's go ahead and modify in sculpt mode. So unlike pose mode, which modifies the shape using the armature, sculpt and edit mode directly modifies the mesh. So that means we can switch between sculpt and edit mode using the tab key. Now modifying in sculpt mode, I'll press G for the grab brush and adjust the mouth shape to make the smile more pronounced. I'll press I for the inflate brush and gently seal the lips. We can also switch to edit mode for any final tweaks. And after making the necessary modification, let's click apply to finalize the changes. Alright, Now we have this weird smile as a post library. Let's go ahead and rename this controller here in this name field. Let's call that creepy smile. And you can see the controller updates accordingly. Alright, you may notice a slight delay when updating. This happens because the asset shelf needs to refresh the posted thumbnails whenever changes are made, and to speed things up, collapsing the asset shelf can help reduce the load time. So now I'll go ahead and remove this creepy smile controller since we don't really need the expression. Now let's take a look at the clear modification button. When I select this QUW controller and apply it, you can see the shape assigned to it. Now when I click the clear button and then try to apply the controller, you can see nothing happens, and that is because the shape data has been erased. Alright, so at the bottom part of the panel, we have the controller name field, which we've already seen what it does. It allows us to rename controllers. Next to it is the pin button. This is useful after repositioning a controller. Let's create a new controller to illustrate this. Now when I move this controller to the side of the rig, let's quickly rename it to frown. Now you'll notice that when I reset the rig's location, the controller jumps back to its previous position. To prevent this from happening, after repositioning the controller, clicking the pin button ensures the controller remains fixed even after resetting the location of the rig. The pin icon is usually shaded out, but when the controller is moved, it becomes highlighted, indicating it can be pinned. Okay, now below the name fields are two fields. The first field is the scale value, which adjusts the size of the controller for better visibility. And below that is the offset value, and this moves the controller relative to the meter for convenient positioning. Okay, so those are the functions for the lip meter panel. Now let's move on to refining the mouth shapes for the essential lip sync phonemes. Let's quickly run through the mouth shapes in the asset shelf. So this is zero pose, this is AHJ, BMP, CDE, FV, IR, LTH, OY, and QUW. Now, depending on the character you're working with, the shapes may not always look perfect. So to refine the mouth shapes, it's always a good idea to have a reference of what the mouth looks like when pronouncing these letters. You can get images from sites like Pinterest by using keywords like lip sync phonemes. So here is something I found on Pinterest, and I will be using these as a guide to refine the mouth shapes. Alright, let's take that away. Now let's collapse the asset shelf to speed things up. Before refining the shapes, I like to split the viewport. Actually, let's first duplicate the workspace and rename it to lip sync. Now we can split the viewports. I'll make this side rendered view, but first let's clean up the viewport by pressing N to hide the side panel, T to hide the tool shelf, and also hide the overlays and widgets. Now I'll switch this viewport to rendered view up here, and from this menu, I'll disable scene world for a brighter scene. Alright, so now let's start refining the controllers. Let's first go back to the RigJNS tab. Now let's start with AHJ, and right now we have a shape applied to the figure, which is this QUW. Let's zero that out. Now I'll select AHJ and then apply that. Looking at the shape, it appears the lower teeth are more visible while the upper teeth are almost completely hidden. So for this, I'll choose to modify in pose mode. Now let's select the lower teeth bone, and if you can't find some of these bones, then you might need to go to the amateur properties here, and under viewport display, ensure to have the in front option checked. Alright, now I'll move the lower teeth down so they are barely visible. I'll also move the upper teeth down so we see more of them. Okay, the tongue appears to be floating, so let's make it rest inside the mouth. Let's see what that looks like. I should move the lower teeth down a little more to increase the gap between the upper and lower teeth. That looks better. Now I'll go ahead and apply the changes. And now AHJ is refined. Okay, now I'll modify one more controller and then do the rest in time lapse so we don't make the video too long. So next is PMP. When I apply the shape, you can see there's an issue. The inner mouth is poking through the lower lip. So for this, I'll modify in sculpt mode. Now before we start sculpting, let's do some housekeeping to make the process easier. So first, let's go to the face set menu up here, select initialize face set and select by materials. So what this does is it gives different parts of the mesh separate colors based on their materials. It is especially useful when we want to isolate specific areas without affecting everything else. And in this case, I want to work on the face, lips, and mustache while avoiding the inner mouth and teeth. Okay, now I can hide parts I'll be working on. So with the mouse over the mustache, I'll press H to hide it. Then I'll do the same for the face and also the lips. Now I'm going to mask this mesh by going to the mask menu and then select fill mask. Now everything is masked, so we can bring back the hidden parts by pressing Alt H, and you can see the hidden parts are not affected by the masking. Now I can sculpt without worrying about messing the teeth or the inner mouth. When sculpting, sometimes the subdivision modifier can slow things down. If that happens, you can temporarily disable it using this button, and you can enable it back again as you make the adjustments. Now let's fix the poking issues in the mouth. I'll press G for the grab brush, then press F to scale the brush up, and then I'll pull out this region of the mouth. Okay, I will press S for the smooth brush, reduce the influence to around 0.3, and then smooth this area of the mustache. Now I'll turn the subdivision modifier back on to see how it looks. I'll disable that. The upper lips is sagging a little, so let's smooth that out. I also noticed this area of the mustache looks stretched, so I'll need to fix that. I'll start by hiding the mustache and then go to the mask menu and select fill mask to include the entire face. Now I will unhide the mustache, and using the grab brush, I'll pull down some of the upper parts of the mustache to reduce the stretching. Always make sure the X-axis mirror is enabled so changes are applied symmetrically. Let's turn subdivision back on to see how it looks. Okay, I still need to smooth the lips, but the smooth brush isn't working because the lips are masked. So to unmask them, return to the mask menu and select clear mask. Now I can smooth this area of the lips. Okay, this looks good. So let's go ahead and click apply. Okay, so now I'll continue refining the rest of the controllers in time lapse. Alright, I'm done refining all the controllers. Now let's maximize this rendered viewport to see the results. I will expand the asset shelf poses. The first pose is the 0 pose, then AHJ. Nothing happens, and that's because I still have a controller selected. So let's turn on the overlays. Yep, QUW selected. So I'll click on an empty space in the viewport to deselect everything, hide the overlays again. Now when I select the AHJ pose, it applies correctly. Now let's look at BMP, CDE, FV, IR, LTH, OY, and QUW. So now that the shapes are refined, we are ready to set up the scene for the actual lip sync animation. But before we start with that, let's change the viewport shading back to solid. Now I'll start by collapsing the timeline. I only need these buttons to be visible. Next, I'll split the viewport into two. And again, I'll split this top part and drag this one to the side. Here I like to keep the controllers visible while animating. Now to see the controllers, I will enable the overlays, click the drop down menu, and then disable everything here, except for the bones option. Okay, now I'll go to local view to isolate the rig. Let's also collapse the asset shelf to get more space. Okay, next thing is in the properties panel, under the item tab, I'll scroll down to the rig layers section and then disable all the layers. and then press N to hide the panel. Let's zoom in on the controllers. Press 1 for front view. I think I'll also disable the grid. So having the controllers here will help us monitor their level of influence. Now for the viewport at the bottom, I'm also going to split it into two. The top one I will change to the dope sheet. Make sure you set this to the action editor. Now I'll change the lower section to the video sequencer, which is where we'll bring in the audio for the lip sync. Now to import the audio file, you can press Shift A or go to the add menu here and then select sound or movie depending on what your file is. Mine is a movie, so I'll select that and then locate the file. I'll go ahead and add that. Now let's make the frame range match the audio. So let's zoom out on the strip and then take the playhead to the end of the audio. Looks like it ends around frame 470. So with the mouse on the current frame field, I'll press Ctrl C to copy that and then paste it on the end frame field. Okay, now let's hit play to hear the audio.
Want this string? I tell you, said it again to my face. What did you say about my brother? Stay away from my brother, cause I say so.
Alright, the audio is a bit long, so we're just going to animate a short part of it for this tutorial. Alright, so here we have two strips, the audio strip and the video strip. Since I only need the audio, I'll right click on the strip and then choose disconnect strips to split the audio from the video. Then I'll select the video strip and press H to hide that. Now to make the waveform on the audio strip more visible, we can scale it up by going here to this scroll bar, drag the top edge there and also the bottom edge. If it happens that you're not seeing the waveform on the audio strip, then you'll have to press N to bring up the properties panel, select the audio strip, and under the sound tab, make sure display waveform is checked. And while we are here, let's also reduce the volume to around 0.7 so that it's not too loud. So the waveform have spikes representing spoken words, and that helps us time the keyframe more accurately. Now before we start creating keyframes for the lip sync animation, we need to turn on auto keying here so the keyframes are recorded automatically. Also we need to go over to keying and change the keying set to scale because the controllers work using scaling. Then under the playback settings, change the sync mode to sync to audio. This ensures the playback matches the audio timing. And also enable audio scrubbing. This is so that when we move the playhead around the audio strip, we hear the sound like this. Okay, now up here we have our viewport for previewing the animation. We also have the asset shelf for applying the poses. You can see some of the poses are missing, so let's resize this window a bit. Now we have all the essential controllers visible. Alright, like I said, we're only going to animate a small chunk of the audio, so let's play it again. Alright, so we will be animating just this part where it says, I dare you to say that again to my face. Now I'll scrub to the start of that line. Looks like it begins around frame 50, so let's set the start frame to 50. Okay, let's listen to the end of the line. It ends around frame 120, so let's make the end frame 120. Alright, so let's listen to what we have. Okay, so this is the chunk we are going to animate. Let's zoom in for a closer view of the waveform. We also want to have the frame range of the audio visible here in the action editor. Now let's go back to the beginning and then scrub through. So the I sound in IdeaU starts around here. So let's go ahead and apply the IR pose. Once we apply it, you'll notice keyframes appear for all the controllers down here in the dope sheet. Here we have their names. Let's collapse that so we only have this master keyframe, which we can easily move around to shift the timing of the entire pose. Now with the I sound applied, we are now going to insert a 0 pose few frames before the I pose. So now I'll press the arrow key to go back about 4 frames. Then apply the 0 pose. This ensures the animation starts from a closed mouth as it transitions to pronounce I. Okay, so I'll go ahead and keyframe the rest of the phrase as I listen to the audio. The word dear uses the CDE pose. Let's go ahead and apply that. Next we have U, which is the QUW pose. Then we have to sound, which is also QW again. And for say, it's a mix of two shapes. It starts with CDE and then transition into AHJ. One important thing to keep in mind when creating keyframes for your lip sync is to leave at least one empty frame between two different keyframes. The spacing helps the transition between poses feel smooth. If a keyframe is placed immediately after another on the very next frame, it makes the mouth snaps rapidly. Now let's continue. So here we have say that. For that, let's go ahead and apply LTH. Next is again. So for the A part, we will apply AHJ. And for gain, we will use CDE. Then we have 2, which is QUW. Now for my, it starts with M sound, so we'll use BMP. And then we have the I sound, which is IR here. Let me move the I keyframe forward. Face starts with the F sound. So let's apply FV. Then the A sound comes in, which is AHJ. And finally, it ends with an S sound, which is CDE. Alright, so we're done with that line. Now I'll increase the end frame to 130 just to give us a little more breathing room to view the animation. Now let's hit play to preview what we have. I think it's better we maximize the viewport for a closer look. So I'll press Ctrl Space, zoom in on the mouth, and then play the animation. Alright, so here I have a different blend file. I've gone ahead and completed the lip sync animation, and you can see that I've also created controllers to add expressions to the character, which is just to make the character feel more alive and expressive. Now, unlike the lip sync controllers, where we made use of the add to pose library option in order to have their poses saved in the pose library, the expression controllers were created with this add to pose library option disabled, so I had to apply their effects manually using the scale widget. Now, going back to the previous window, down here in the NLA editor, I have the completed lip sync animation. So after keyframing the animation, I simply push the lip sync action down into the NLA, which is what we have here. And below that is the expressions action strip, which means I animated the expression as a different action from the lip sync action. Okay, so now let's go ahead and play the animation.
Say about my brother, stay away from my brother, cause I say so. If you put your paws on my brother, you'll meet the jaws of his brother. Those are the laws for my brother.
Okay, and that brings us to the end of this lesson. I hope you found it helpful. If that's the case, don't forget to give it a like. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section, and kindly subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. Thank you for your time. Till next time.